start. This is just like college. People are going to come in late. So if I wait, people still keep coming in late. So that's just how we go. If we start, we have more time. If we start on time, we have more time. So welcome to the State of Sakai talk. How many of you also went to Neil Caden's Sakai 11 update talk? So there'll be a tiny bit of overlap between this, but I hope we won't bore you too much. My name is Charles Severance. I'm the chair of the Project Management Committee of the Sakai Project within the Apereo Foundation. And so we've been doing this for 10 years, and I think that we are probably the only Apereo project that now has a kitty video associated with it. How many people have seen the kitty video? Okay, so for the rest of you who haven't seen the kitty video, so let me tell you a story about the kitty. So they say that open source is free as in free puppies, not free beer. Well, it's also free as in free kitties, not free beer. And so my wife's sister lives in a country where people drop cats off all the time, and then the cats show up, and then they take up residence. And so this cat, they were going to go get it spayed, but as they took the cat to the doctor, they said, surprise, 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 you're going to have kitties. And now there's this whole giant kitty industry that surrounds my sister-in-law's house. And so like my daughter gets a kitty, my nephew gets a kitty, and there's this one kitty left over, and it's the runt of the litter. And they're like, we're negotiating with my wife, saying, you need a kitty, right? You have to have a kitty. And the kitty had these really strange facial markings. They're the same facial markings of the Sakaiger, of course. And so there is some debate as to what to name this kitty. I believe my wife will call this kitty Sophie when that wants the kitty to show up, but I will certainly call this kitty Sakai Girl. Because when I filmed this, I did not know if this was a boy or a girl, because in the early days of kitties, you can't tell the gender for a couple more weeks. But when I filmed this, we didn't know, so it'll be called Sakai Girl, because it turns out that it is a girl. So here is the Sakaiger kitty movie. And it actually has a deep, important lesson about who we are and why we are what we are. And I hope I can make it work. Come on, Sakaiger kitty. The lesson there, of course, is that the purpose that we all have been doing for the past 10 years is not necessarily to have 100% market share, but to affect the market and keep the market fair by biting those in the marketplace, or at least gently challenging those others in the marketplace to do their best. And while we could have ended up with 100% market share, and that would have been great, it really isn't sort of consistent with our values. And so it's the little runt kitty gets to kick all the other kitties out of the kitty basket. So we did something last fall that we've never done before that for me it wasn't the biggest thing in the world, but it was an important moment. And we worked with Asahi.net, now Scriba, Longsight, and Unicon to fund something more than $10,000, which is a banner at EDUCAUSE. And the idea was that we would put this banner at the entrance to the general session of EDUCAUSE right there. That's the banner. That's where it was at EDUCAUSE. Everybody walked in and saw the banner. And what we were trying to say with this banner was that just because we're only a 6% market share, just because we're not aggressive, just because we're not mean and nasty, doesn't mean that Sakai is not important. And the thing that makes Sakai most important in this marketplace is it really is the only learning management system on the planet that has a near direct connection between the faculty members and students that learn and teach using Sakai and the Sakai developers, meaning that pretty much anybody may not, a faculty member may know someone on campus who knows a Sakai core developer, and that's really not the case in any other learning management system on the planet, meaning not just a person who hacks on it, but a person who's a core developer. And so we thought that that was an important part of our value proposition. We have spent the last 10 years, 11 now, fighting in many ways over our core values. When we were formed, we had this concept called community source. That concept was a source of constant frustration because everyone thought they had the definition of community source and then thought by defining community source they would own us. And over the last 5 years, and Seth, raised your hand. He pointed out that it's been about 5 years since we kind of fought the last revolution that assured that we would be open, free, and work with only those who are in our community and not sort of bow to anybody outside our community, even if those folks had money, right? So we are open source. We are not community source. We have an open and accessible community. We have an open planning process. We have mutual respect throughout our entire community. We are inclusive, and the only shareholders that we care about are you and the other customers that use this and use it on their campuses. And so we're not beholden to anybody at all except for the people that use our product. And we don't have to do anything in the name of money. We do only the things that are in the name of pedagogy or in the name of elegance or in the name of leadership. We have very stable project leadership. The project management committee is a bunch of wonderful people, most of whom have like 8 or more years. Those of you who are not in the PMC don't feel particularly jealous. Part of our whole governance strategy is to be as open as possible with all decisions that we make and devolve them. I mean, this group, since it was formed with a different title 5 years ago, I'm not sure it's ever had a close vote on anything. I'm not sure we even have votes. I guess when we elect a chair, we have a vote, but that's about it. Because we all just trust each other and respect each other, and everybody brings to this project what they bring. And whether you're on this committee or not does not really much matter about your impact. So we've never been about market share. We never have been, and I hope never will be. We are about building the greatest thing. Our market share will ebb and flow based on the conditions of the rest of the marketplace. If there's something sexy and strong in the marketplace, and Angel was sexy and strong, Moodle Rooms was sexy and strong, and Canvas is currently sexy and strong, we're going to lose a bit of market share. If some company makes a horrible mistake, like what WebCT did when they got bought by Blackboard, what Angel did when they got bought by, things will come in our direction, right? We will absorb, we will lose, but our goal is to move forward and build the greatest learning management system on the planet and not be so worried about building the learning management system that will lead to higher market share. It seems at times that we have lost some people in the last year or so, and that indeed is true. We've lost some, but there are opportunities. Blackboard's market itself is aging. The Angel is now end of life. There could easily be a situation where, especially with Sakai 11, that we could gain some good attention, right? And everyone talks to me about, let's do something right now. And I'm like, well, let's do something when we have something awesome to talk about. And the commercial competition is intensifying, but really that's not that different over the last 10 years of this project. One thing that we have done that has been totally transformative, that has touched almost every single teacher and learner, regardless of market share, is our leadership in standards. We have been the sand in the oyster of the market, We have been the one that has always been the first to adopt ideas that might seem as they would naturally harm market share. If you go all the way back to 2007, 2008, the idea for each vendor was to create as much a closed ecosystem as possible, and we broke that. We broke it in many ways: learning tools interoperability, common cartridge. All of these standards were actually founded by us, right? IMS Learning Tools Interoperability was founded by actions by the Sakai board, said that if Blackboard and Sakai are going to work together, we're going to do it through IMS, and we're going to create a standard called Learning Tools Interoperability. And that was in May 2004 was the first time the words Learning Tools Interoperability. And by the next year, June 2005, already demonstrations had been made. We had had an impact just by saying the only way we'll talk to anybody else, the only way we'll coordinate is through standards. Common Cartridge had a meeting in like February 2005, 10 years ago, where the publishers came to us and said, we don't like Blackboard's proprietary content strategy that causes us to pay them money every time someone imports a cartridge, and we would like you to invent a standard. And we, Sakai, said, I mean, Pearson came, Wiley came, everybody came. It was like a mafia room, right, with all the mafia people and all the families, and the Sakai board on one side and all the families of the publisher mafia on the other side. And we said, well, that's great. Let's make a thing called the Common Cartridge and make it so it's a standard. And let's do that standardization in IMS, and we'll surprise everybody at the June meeting and announce this thing, and everyone will applaud loudly, even though 98% of the people already knew that it was going to happen, except for Blackboard didn't know it was going to happen. So Common Cartridge is also a Sakai-created thing. We have used the threat that we are in the marketplace in ways that allow us to change the marketplace. LTI 2.0, Sakai was the first to ship that. We just are always first in these things. We are first to build the reference implementations for these standards to help support others. Canvas, building their LTI 2, looked at our source code. Is that bad or is that good? And the answer is that is absolutely great for all people. And Blackboard had a hacked up version of LTI 2 running in a building block like a year and a half ago in a lab because they took my code, threw it in a building block, and it was saying hello world. It never turned into a product, but the point is we influence, we give, and we influence through what we give to the marketplace. We're over 10 years old now. It's been a rough 10 years. It really has. I would wish that we had not shipped any piece of software at all until Sakai 2.9. I don't think that would have been successful. I don't think we could have started a project in 2004 and only developed software through 2013 and then released that software in 2013. I just don't think it would have worked. But it would have been an awesome piece of software at that point. And we might have, if we'd never even released anything in 9 years, we might have actually got it done faster. But be that as it may, Sakai 2.9 was the first. I mean, how many people adopted a product before Sakai 2.9? Okay, I'm just going to say publicly that you people are insane. Okay, Sakai was a very weak product 2.8 and before. It was technically okay, but it didn't have Lesson Builder in 2.8. You just can't compete when you don't have something like that. Oh, but now we have Lesson Builder. So it's easy for me to say that now about 2.8. But 2.8 was an incomplete product, and everything we did before that were also incomplete products. So it's really kind of fun at the moment we ship 2.9, you say, whew, that was close, that nobody figured out what we weren't able to do for 9 years, and now we're in good shape. So Sakai 10 was, for a lot of the technical people in the project, was a celebration that we were able to sort of do things that had been in the back of our mind, but we were so afraid to work on because we needed to finish the product. So Sakai 10 was really fun. And Sakai 11 is an extension of that. So a lot of sort of under-the-covers cloud hosting things were fixed. A lot of small UI improvements that had been waiting for a while had been fixed. But the Sakai 11 is our chance to be really crazy, right? Because Sakai 10's pretty awesome. Sakai 2.9 was awesome. Sakai 10 is pretty awesome. Literally, if you could run Sakai 10 for the next 5 years and never upgrade, we wouldn't be ashamed of that product. I mean, we don't want to stop, but we wouldn't be ashamed of it. I would be ashamed if you ran 2.8. I'd be ashamed if you were still running 2.8 right now. It's like people who were running Blackboard 6. I mean, that was a yucky product, and Blackboard was ashamed of it, as well they should have been. And I was ashamed of Sakai 2.5, 2.6, and all those. Again, none of you are running them, so I can say that. So the problem we have is that we had a great, great ride in 2004 and 2005, but we had really crappy software. And we were the talk of the town at the EDUCAUSE in the fall of 2004. In January 2004, the word Sakai was unknown in the vernacular of higher education, and by the fall of 2004, you'd go in a room with 5 times as many people in this and say, how many people have heard the brand Sakai? And literally every hand on the planet. Literally more people knew about Sakai in the first 9 months of Sakai than knew about MOOCs. People are like, what, MOOC? I haven't heard that word. But Sakai, we created as the greatest brand ever, that underneath it was the worst software that you could imagine. I had a whole talk last year where I just talked about how bad that software was, right? But you just sit there like, I hope nobody ever notices how crappy we are. Let's keep working on this and keep fixing it. And so what happened was we didn't deliver, by the end of 2005, we didn't deliver things like a better product than WebCT. If we had, we'd probably own all the WebCT customers in the country right now, and in the world right now. But we weren't ready. We didn't have Lesson Builder in 2005. So the 2.0, and our perception was sinking and dropping. And then 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, and 2.8 were these kind of just climbing up this hill, slowly but surely, just fixing one sort of giant leak after another, one missing feature, this, that, and the other thing. And 2.9, we kind of pulled even at that point, right? And I think the market's like, oh, Sakai, not so bad, right? And I think Sakai 10 is also like kind of the market can look at Sakai, they see a thing, they think we're this awesome, and we are this awesome. But I think Sakai 11 gives us a moment to sort of pull away and be a little more exciting. This is the kind of thing that we did in Sakai 10, right? And these turned out to be a whole bunch of things that our end users wanted, often viewed through our commercial affiliates like Longsight and what's your new name? Scriba, that's right. Longsight, Scriba, and Unicon had all this kind of backlog. And so we had some time in Sakai 10 to kind of clear the backlog. Things like Columbia and Duke had ideas, and they had money, and Notre Dame had ideas and money. And we advanced this product. It was just kind of a clean up the stuff that's kind of broken because you've been sprinting for so long, and release, code, release, and like, wait a sec, okay, we don't have to freak out anymore. What are those things that we've been kind of pushing? So Sakai 10 was kind of a catch-up release of cool stuff, right? Drag and drop upload, plenty of LMSs still don't even have that, right? And so in Sakai 11, we found ourselves in a really, really strange situation. We were January 2014. We decided to have kind of a tech retreat at Phoenix, Arizona, where we brought a bunch of folks, not just Sakai, but other Apereo projects came there. And we did something that we'd never done since the beginning, and that was we decided that we would write a straw man. We'd always gotten in trouble with straw man proposals for next releases because we'd write a date down and some chump manager somewhere would all want to hold us to it and be like, hey, you're late. It's like, well, we'll write a date down. It's a date we're agreeing among ourselves, and if we have to change the date, we'll change the date. And then we thought, well, why don't we write down the features that we think we might be able to deliver in a year, year and a half? We started writing those things down. And we just put it in a wiki page, right? It's not slick. It doesn't have any marketing behind it. It's just a wiki page. And so we just said, what do you think you're going to just walk around the table? What do you think you can do? Not what do you want, but what do you think you can do? And so we started writing this straw man down. And it's great. And if your primary marketing document, of course, is just kind of yucky, a bunch of, sans serif words, which turn out to be real important, we still have a wiki. And you can even see what we changed at each meeting in our roadmap. We're like, oh, well, I think that didn't work out as well as we thought. Oh, but we found this other thing, yada, 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 around and around. And so we just have this document that's rather unsophisticated, but it's the people doing the work, writing down on a shared scribble area to say what they've done. And we've even had things like, once we wrote things down, we would find coordination points, say, oh, I'm going to stop doing mine because I'm going to help you with yours, et cetera, et cetera. And even some of the things we dreamed of in 11, because that was January of last year, 11 dreamed of for 10, by June of that year, we'd actually done some of those things. So the things we'd scheduled for 11 were done early, which is very exciting. So Sakai 11, we want to sort of push the envelope in Sakai 11. And so instead of tearing apart the infrastructure and like the search and Elasticsearch, we're tearing apart the user interface, right? The Morpheus portal is just tearing everything apart. And I'm surprised that after we put that into trunk that people weren't screaming for days and days. Part of the reason is that TDA portal has been sort of a early tester of the technology we use to eliminate the iframes. And of course, NYU, Marist, and Murcia have done a great job, continue to do a great job to make this look better and make it look, as someone was telling me in a previous session, it looks like it belongs on the web in 2015. The Gradebook UI redesign, significant amount of work. The Lessons UI redesign, I think there's still some issues on that. But we were not afraid to break everything in the name of a better user experience and user interface. And we knew that the QA might be longer. We knew that the delivery date would be something we couldn't predict very well. But we said, let's do it, because we got Sakai 10. And what's wrong with 6 more months of Sakai 10? We got to take a risk, and we got to live on the edge. We also sort of started this Kickstarter notion to fund some of these things. And it'd be nice if we had a Kickstarter webpage with little kiddie videos and stuff to raise funds. But I think we have a fixed HTML page that someone just edits the HTML and changes the percentage. But the idea of a Kickstarter and taking money that one school wants to throw at a problem and then see if there's only 3 or 4 more. We didn't try to raise gigantic amounts of money. We just said we'll just raise some money for these specific things so that we don't sort of over-confuse our coordination mechanisms by, oh, here's $1 million. And that $1 million now tries to run the whole show and tells us what to do. We have those small, specific, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 chunks of money that then solve a very specific problem that it's easy to get consensus around. A big part, which Neil's talked about, is the dashboard. I'm hoping that this will just completely replace the home tool. The home tool annoys me because it uses 3 iframes, which I can't get rid of. So I want to kill the home tool and replace it with a dashboard, which uses 1 iframe, which I can inline using my iframe technology, so that's good. You can see it's kind of nice, square-looking, bootstrappy kind of thing, and got a little picture of me over there. And this is still kind of going to go through some more review, and there's like a UI review, I think, going to happen here at the conference, or maybe it's already happened. Please participate in that. The Lessons UI redo, trying to make that a little more approachable for people. The Gradebook. The Gradebook it's trying to catch up with other gradebooks that happen to be in the marketplace that people seem to like. And so you want to make it so that teachers have fewer and fewer clicks. Most of our most successful UI redesigns have been effectively letting people reduce the number of clicks. So if you want to just change a bunch of grades, or sort or whatever, and so this is actually a really amazing piece of work because the front half is all redesigned, but the back half, the database and all that, is unchanged, which is actually pretty awesome that we've been able to achieve this. And this should be landing in trunk in a couple of weeks, I think. And so we're going to have a meeting Thursday afternoon where we pretty much finalize, but pretty much what I said will be in Sakai 11. There'll be little things that'll kind of come in. We think toward the end of the month will be our code freeze, and then we'll start a very, very significant QA process because it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot to get this QA'd because we just changed so much and did so on purpose. It'd be lovely if we could have this out by 4th quarter of this year. Community is important as well. So I'll borrow this slide from Neil. We changed from SVN to GitHub as a source code repository. But that vastly understates what the meaning of that is. GitHub is the modern way that modern open source projects engage extremely large communities that are outside their core committers. SVN is generally dedicated to the notion that you pretty much can't do anything without prior permission, right? And so the way, if you weren't one of the chosen can do stuff easily, and the non-chosen have to file a bug report with a patch. And then if we get around to it, or maybe the patch gets too old, if we get around to it, great, but more often the patch would get too old, then we go back and say, oh, the patch doesn't work, and we start all over, right? Well, GitHub basically makes it so that anybody with no prior permission can send what's called a pull request. They can make a patch to our product and send a request. And we have a queue of them. And the core committers go through the queue regularly. People like Sam and Earl do a great job of this, just going through the queue and bam, in they go, not letting the queue grow, which means that our committers have changed. We are getting commits from people who really have never committed to our product before. This is Olo, and there's it's a kind of busy slide, but on the bottom at the far left you see sort of a uptick in the number of committers that coincides exactly with the moment of switching to GitHub. So all of a sudden we go from 20-ish to like 35, like overnight. And that's just because we opened the door, right? We didn't sort of recruit these people. We don't even know who they are. And so this is the GitHub data, which actually includes the data from SVN. And you can kind of see a couple of trends in this GitHub data. You can see that we've been doing a lot of work. We can see that we wrote a lot of code in 07, 08, and 09, all the times which we were terrified that we weren't good enough for the marketplace. You see kind of a downward trend settling down. You do see humps every time there's a release. We get a little more excited. But there is generally a downward trend, and part of that is because since 2.9, we have had a feature-complete product, and now we're more cleanup. And so it's natural that the commits are going to go down. So we can see our top 4 committers. We have we have David from UCT. We have Beth from Michigan. We have Steve Swinsberg from his own small lair inside of a volcano somewhere, and then Jen from Michigan. And these people have been with the project for a long time and done a lot of work, and so, yeah, they're going to be hard to catch up with, especially now with GitHub. We tend to tell people, squeeze your commits into one commit, and it's like, whoa, how am I going to catch up with Beth if you keep telling me to squeeze my 4 commits into one commit? But that's interesting. But actually, I think what's more interesting is finding a person who I don't even know, Vacercon. Is that person in this room? This is just like some random person that did like a tiny little change to Samago. And they only worked like 2 commits in February this year. Done. Applied. Merged. Who they are? Why they did this? I don't know. But we have a new committer. So I actually find it much more interesting to go to the bottom of the committer list than to look at the top of the committer. I know all the people at the top of the committer list. I want to find out who the people are at the bottom of the committer list. And that's really interesting for an open source community. It's really difficult to grow and feel more porous and have people gently come into your community. This is a graph that I've been publishing for a long time. This is a graph of the email traffic by organization on the Sakai developer list from 2006 through 2014. And some of the things that you can see on it, you see the effect of Steven Swinsberg, who talks a lot. He's that kind of big blue, most of the gmail.com, that's a big top thing, that's Steven Swinsberg. You see the University of Michigan, which is that red line that starts up way high and then goes down. Even in 2014, the University of Michigan has not stopped completely participating in the list. You see things like Cambridge, which started low but then went really high, and that's that yellow link, and it goes all the way down. I should probably just do this, right? Cambridge goes down. And so Cambridge walked away from the project, basically, right? There's people that, they did a lot of stuff and whatever. And then you see things like Indiana University that sort of started here and just kind of like sank and sank and sank and sank and sank and sank, right? And that's okay. I mean, they were a big part of what we were at the beginning and, recently. And so, people talk about the fact that University of Michigan and Indiana are not in the same leadership roles that they were in. And I'll suggest to you that they vacated those leadership roles 2 to 3 years ago, actually, not yesterday. And Michigan, for example, isn't completely vacated its leadership role. But then you see things like this little purple graph, which is Longsight. So you see commercial affiliates. Steven Swinsberg is a one-man commercial affiliate. But you also see Longsight that just kind of goes up, and this is like Sam and Matt and others that are now, Longsight is kind of like the second most important group that talks on the dev list and answers questions. So you see something of a project that's maturing over time from a very academic-oriented project, writing a bunch of new code continuously, to more of a stable project with commercial companies that have reasons to keep this project going. And so you're seeing this transition. And we don't lack for academic leadership. We have lots of academic leaders, even though Stanford, Michigan, and Indiana, and MIT, which were the 4 founders of the organization, are really only, Michigan is minorly involved, and the rest of them are pretty much uninvolved at this point. But we have wonderful schools, and what you find in open source is that the moment there's an opening or a vacuum, somebody moves in. New York University says it's our time to shine, and they have been shining for a while. Columbia, Notre Dame. Did I forget North Carolina on here? I always forget somebody on here. So, but the point is leadership happens, and like New York University, it's a great feeling to be able to transform the experience for 3 to 4 million users around the world in a couple of years by you passionately caring about something. And I guess Michigan got tired of that, Indiana got tired of that, but NYU's not tired of that. And in 5 years, NYU might be tired of that, and that's okay, and we'll find another school. And this thing is surprisingly smooth transition. This is a graph of the JIRAs that are created and resolved from January 2012 through January 2015. It's a 3-year period. At the beginning of this 3-year period, Stanford was the primary committer on Samigo. And at the end of this 3-year period, Longsight was the primary committer on Samigo. Can you tell what year that transition happened? Because it was a pretty distinct transition when it happened. Anybody know? Can you see from that graph when it sort of like, whoa, Stanford stopped working on this? It's right in the middle. That's exactly when Stanford's effort started going down and Longsight picked up the slack. Again, these transitions, these leadership transitions, they seem terrifying when you sort of just look at them by themselves, but when you look at them from a point of view of a sustainable community, we can handle this, right? We can handle this nicely. So thinking about Sakai 12, if Sakai 2.9 was kind of our first entry into the marketplace, Sakai 10 was fixing up the bits that we've been waiting to fix. Sakai 11 is like, whoa, we're pretty cool again, and we might even sort of win some business with Sakai 11. What exactly might we think about once Sakai 11 is done, right? So, what would Sakai 12 be? And I would suggest that at some point, the most important thing going on in this building is the emerging learning systems like Xerte, Karuta, OpenCast, and even my little Tsugi project. This notion that the LMS is dead, everyone says that. I don't think it's ever going to be true, but the LMS is going to be different in the future, right? The LMS is going to be very different in the future. The LMS increasingly is going to be a peer to all these excellent tools. So it's not like there's Sakai and a little open source portfolio in it. No, Karuta is its own thing that exchanged data with Sakai. And so the problem that these projects all face, honestly, all these projects face, is Darcy Norman's law of e-learning convergence, and that is any e-learning tool, no matter how openly designed or wise the founders, I made that part up, will eventually become indistinguishable from an LMS once a threshold of supported use cases has been reached. And that's because when you start a project, let's just use Karuta as an example. Actually, Open Source Portfolio is a perfect example. They were going to do portfolio stuff, and they said, well, wouldn't it be better if we just used an LMS? Because we need all these features, because no one really wants to use a portal if it doesn't have a chat tool and doesn't have this tool. And so they drove themselves in a direction to be like an LMS. And so the problem is all these things are going to suffer that fate if they want to be successful. They don't want to be an LMS, but then to be successful, they have to be an LMS. So then you end up on this quest. There's this LMS at University of Michigan called Gradecraft. It's a gamified LMS. It has gamification. They've been working on it for 3 years. The first 9 months they worked on gamification. The next 9 months they worked on uploading files, sending email, doing all the things that LMSs do, right? Distracted from their original mission because to succeed, they had to become an LMS. So you're stuck being forced to be an LMS. And so this, to me, in order to enable a future where LMSs and tools work together very cleanly, we need an LMS that's willing to let go. We need an LMS in the future that's willing to let go of core functionality. We need a community of builders who are happier removing functionality than they are adding new functionality. This community wants to remove the Wiki tool. Doesn't mean we don't want to have a wiki tool. We just want to get rid of our wiki tool and get another wiki tool. So we're not motivated to try to, like a commercial company is, to try to pull something in. There's plenty of examples of commercial companies who want to give really crappy integrations to third-party products because they have a secret plan to build that into their product later. So in the short term, they'll let you play in their little world, and in the long term, they're going to write their own replacement to you and kick you out of their world. What's cool about Sakai doesn't want to be selfish and hold things to itself. And so if it can delegate something like the portfolio problem, which is a hard problem by itself, to a project like Karuta, we want to do that. And we'll even change our system to do that, and have changed our system to make it easier to be more flexible and meet the needs of Karuta. And so Sakai is the one LMS in the marketplace that has no urge to hold everything that's innovative to itself. Every one of these other LMSs has business models that drive them to not enjoy partnering with others, but instead build everything themselves and create one-stop solutions. We're the only LMS that could possibly imagine a future where we're not the one-stop solution, but we are a wide open integration platform for lots of other folks. So this whole thing kind of becomes a learning platform, right? And it all depends on APIs and all kinds of great APIs. And these learning systems are these things that are more pedagogically interesting than a learning management system. And so, at some point for now, we think of these things as plugging into a learning management system. But you could imagine at some point that we would be so good at plugging things in that it's easier to build a learning management system. It turns out that you can even use LTI to have your gradebook outside of a learning management system. I met somebody at a conference who's using Google Sites as a learning management system because you put your gradebook outside. You use Google Sites for everything, and you have a gradebook, and then you have assessments that talk to that gradebook. You never bring the assessments into Google Sites, but you have a gradebook and assessments that talk to each other out there, and they have a little button inside Google Sites called The Gradebook and The Quizzes. But Google Sites has no quizzes, right? So you start thinking, wow, you can outsource just about everything if you work hard enough at it. And then you start thinking, well, what would it be kind of fun to turn into an LMS, given that it's not hard to turn anything into an LMS? Then you go like, oh, well, maybe turn the open academic environment into an LMS. I know we tried this before, but we weren't good at outsourcing. The only time that it would be a good idea to make OAE an LMS is if it was trivial. If everything was so easy that it would take one weekend to make OAE an LMS and not require major re-architecting of it. So to me, we don't even start this until making OAE an LMS requires less than a week of work. And I don't actually think we're that far away from that. By the time we do LTI2 and Caliper and a few other things, some of the LTI2 services, we're a year to a year and a half away to the point where we will be able to turn OAE into an LMS in a week. And that's actually quite interesting because you can turn just about anything into an LMS at that point. And then you ask, well, holy crap, you just turned OAE into an LMS. What happened to poor Sakai? Well, Sakai has lots of really great functionality that would help an LMS that didn't have a gradebook, like, say, a gradebook, for example. So maybe we'll have all these Sakai things that are just like cloud-hosted Sakai tools, like a testing engine and a gradebook, and they all talk to each other, and they all plug into Google Sites, or they all plug into OAE, or half a dozen other sort of new learning management systems that are wonderful ways of organizing structure. And so this learning platform, Sakai is the place from whence the learning platform, I believe, will be born. Better stated, Apereo is the place that this learning platform will be born. If you look at the things that we're doing in this building, it's not just about a learning management system. It is about a vision and the trust among projects to depend on one another and not attempt to take over each other's market share because none of us are motivated by the money of what we do. There are commercial companies that will take all these projects and make money, and I think that's great. As a matter of fact, it's June 1st, so I'm no longer a University of Michigan employee. I'm a Longsight employee. September 1st, I become a University of Michigan employee because Longsight pays my summer salary. So thank you for Longsight for paying my summer salary. And so we have a commercial company, Longsight, among many other commercial companies, that will want all these things and want them all to work together. But as a Sakai community, We do not need to solve the problem of how to make that money. We need to be open to all these other systems making use of our services. And that's it. That's all I have to say. I've run out of things to say. I had a marker slide. That was it. Any questions? How much time do I have? Am I out of time? Am I over time? 5 minutes. I wasn't even watching the time. I just luck out. Questions? Comments? Yeah. Fire away, Neil.
So how do you see the evolution of an institution from the current model of an LMS being the central, big giant thing that does everything to a model that's more distributed and will that better meet the needs of teachers and students?
Well, we meet the needs of teachers and students by having multiple paths of innovation that will evolve in the ways they want them to evolve, right? So if a portfolio person came to Sakai and said, I want you to change everything so you're a good portfolio, we'd be like, no, we tried that. It's a bad idea, just go away. But if they come to Karuta and say, we'd like you to move your vector in this slight direction, Karuta will say yes. And the fact that it plugs into Sakai means that away we go. I think that the path to get there, I believe that a diverse ecology of many technology providers, each with different kind of problems that they're solving, is a great idea. I think the path to get there is the Sakai community has to mentor these other communities on how to do this well. I mean, I was sitting in a talk from Texas State talking about their attendance tool, and the question that was asked was, is this multi-tenant? And the answer is no. And then the next question was, well, what tables do you have? And then he listed the tables that he had. And I'm like, you only need one more table to be multi-tenant. Why didn't you put that table in, right? And so that's an example of an experience project with a little tiny project with one person involved who just made a tiny mistake that is the reason that won't scale and become itself its own little thread of curiosity and inquiry. And so I believe it's incumbent upon the Sakai Project to mentor those who would integrate into Sakai and make those integrations awesome and change ourselves when necessary, but also help them build and test better products that really smoothly integrate. Did I answer your question? Sort of. Any other questions? Yeah. So I think that we will see this pace moving quickly, but the faculty will see this moving very slowly, and they will barely notice anything different in their environment, right? And I disagree with those who think that the LMS is a bad thing, in that it's what the faculty apparently want, because there's billions of dollars that are spent on these things that have a resources tool, a threaded discussion, and a quizzing engine, right? And so I think what we'll be able to do is meet the faculty. These new systems will meet the faculty needs of today that they're used to, and they will do better jobs at doing what they're doing now, and they'll just be more capabilities, right? And so they're not going to see it as like, oh, we took your whole learning management system away and replaced it with a wiki, right? They're not going to see it that way. They're going to be like, here's your whole learning management system, and if you really want to use this really cool wiki to do your authoring instead of a thing like lessons, go ahead, right? And so it's not like we took something away. Well, really, by the time we take something away, they won't want it anymore. There'll still be a place to upload files. There'll be a threaded discussion, but you might have 4 threaded discussions, and you might be able to do things like have a small group threaded discussion, a scalable threaded discussion, et cetera, that goes through it. So I think the faculty, if the faculty feels displaced or confused or lost because of what we've done, I think we failed, and our job in technology and standards is to come up with a way to make that seem so seamless that they just see it as an expansion rather than a switch. And I think it's possible. I mean, not with what we've got today in standards, but it's possible in a couple of years that seamlessness will just get better and better and better. Yeah.
With online learning, we're talking about authoring tools like Captivate, Campaign,
So we're surprisingly, in certain areas, we're surprisingly already far down that path. So there is currently a coordination effort between the IDPF, which is the International Digital Book Forum, and IMS on how to embed assessments and other learning activities, like even threaded discussions, in EPUBs. And and there are already vendors in the marketplace where you buy an EPUB, you read the book, you start taking formative assessments in the book, and then 2/3 of the way through the book, you join a class that happens to use that book, and you've actually done some of the homework already. And what happens is there's the book ebook back end just stores this, and you're just like, person 17562, and it just stores it and keeps track of what you're doing and keeps track of your scores and your time on task and all those things. And then all of a sudden, an LTI launch kind of comes in out of nowhere and says, "Oh, I'm person 17642. Really? Oh, wow. Let's send a few gradebook columns up back to this person." And so part of LTI 2.0 is to move to the point where the point of initiation does not always have to be the LMS. It can be other content. And so EPUB and EPUB 3 is probably the place that this is most advanced. The notion that you'll be taking an assessment on what seems to be a web page where they barely know who you are. They don't know your name or anything else, but they do have some cookie set on you, that data will eventually be shared with something. That's being worked out right now. And that leads to embeddability and allowing of the student to take multiple paths to get to the same place, whichever is the best path for them. And so that work is ongoing, and that work is making good progress. And so, if you came back in 5 years, and I'm like talking about Sakai 13 or 14, and I'm like, which is actually, let's just say this picture comes true, like, oh, we're Sakai 14, and Sakai 14 is just a bunch of cloud-hosted tools that are orchestrated by OAE. And then you say, what's next? And I'd say, well, we're going to make a really cool book authoring environment, is what I'd say, which is the next thing after the next thing, is to make this be interactive live books. But it all has to do with the fact that the plumbing is just not there. So you move at the pace at which you can make plumbing. An army marches on its stomach or its toilets, depending on how you look at it. And so that's where I think we'll eventually go, is get to the point where teachers are building super cool content that's super repurposable, and whether it starts in an LMS, ends in an LMS, starts out here, there'll be a lot of ways to skin that cat, but so much work left to do on that. One more question? Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. Have a great conference.